Hi, my name is Scott Syfax, and welcome to the Department of Sound's Sustainable Communities podcast in partnership with SMUD. In this series, we embark on an exploration of SMUD's visionary mission and the remarkable individuals and organizations driving positive change in our vibrant Sacramento region. Today, we have the privilege of introducing you to two exceptional guests whose journeys and work are making an indelible mark on our community. First, we have SMUD Chief Customer Officer, Brandy Bolden.
Hello.
And secondly, we are honored to have the Department of Sound's CEO, Chief Executive, and Chief Visionary, John Hamilton.
Thank you.
Was that okay, John?
I'll take that, Scott.
So let's get started. Brandy, I want to start with you. As Chief Customer Officer for SMUD, you and the people that work for you and with you are really the interface that we have when it is that we've got questions, when we're in trouble and all of that. Your background, you originally came, from a very different background than customer service. Tell us a little bit about that journey that brought you to SMUD and to what you're doing today.
Yeah, so thank you so much. Interestingly enough, I started in customer service when I was really, really young, probably too young to really appreciate what customer service really meant, right? Mm-hmm. For Wells Fargo Bank back in Sacramento. And through my college career and everything, took me heavy into the technology industry. And being in the constant kind of 24/7 daily grind of everything and launching large IT projects, I really I felt like there was something kind of missing, right? You're only getting kind of one side of the impact of what you were doing. And, commuting back and forth from the Bay Area eventually led me to look for opportunities back here in Sacramento. And when asking around of just kind of employment and what were good places to work, SMUD kept coming up. And I go, oh yeah, SMUD. I remember SMUD, they're our electric company. Like, what's up with that? So interviewed, got in, and just fell in love with the work, with the place, with the people. SMUD is one of those unique places that feels, and I know this is cliche to say, but it felt more like family than work.
Okay.
I mean, down to, folks that have been here 20, 30 years and we're still going strong because they loved the environment and the work we did so much. And so I started in customer service at SMUD, and I'm still here. I never left customer service because it's something that really exposed me to different areas of the organization, of the company. And when I started to really understand the impact that we were making in our community, I knew it was something that I could not stay away from. Our strategic directive number one is to improve the quality of life for our customers in our community. And that is something that we take very, very seriously. And so it aligns with my values. I love the work I do. I'm able to make a difference in someone's life each and every day. And that's something that I do not take for granted. And so that's how I got here. And I cannot get enough.
What's really fascinating about you describing your experience about quality life and it having an impact and value for the people that SMUD serves is that many times customer service in itself is a place, it's kind of an oxymoron. Mm-hmm. One is it's not always available. And I was talking about my own experience with, some of the airlines and things like that when you call their customer service. But, energy is such an essential and critical part to our lives. Mm-hmm. And you all wrestle with sometimes not only establishing a relationship with SMUD, but sometimes having to manage very difficult situations when there are the outages like related to storms, or frankly when someone can't pay their bill. Mm-hmm. The approach that you all bring to doing the more difficult parts of the job. Tell us a little bit about the philosophy and values that you and your colleagues bring to that.
Yeah, so it's interesting that you say that, because I think one thing that we've definitely seen in the last 3 to 5 years, right, since COVID, is the needs of the community have grown substantially. And when we deal with customers and the different issues that we have, that they may have in their daily lives, it's really important and imperative for us to understand kind of the context. When a customer's calling in, perhaps they're struggling to pay their bill. The bill is usually the last stop of something larger. It's indicative of a larger issue, a larger conversation, a larger struggle.
Tell us go a little bit deeper on that. The last stop. I've never heard that before.
Yeah. So we, it's really what we have always taught our employees is to pay attention to what you're hearing during the course of an interaction, a phone call, a situation. And what we started to really hear was larger things. I can't pay my bill, but I'm also dealing with, eviction. We haven't, my husband lost his job, so we're not able to provide for food for the family or so on and so forth. So you start to unpack that. And when you're a CSR on the phone, when you're leading with empathy, you're listening and you're understanding. You're like, what else can we do? Mm-hmm. And we started to really kind of collect that information and go, okay, there's a real need here. How can we mobilize our efforts internally, our partnerships, right, with our community partners, and figure out how we can service a customer from a 360 point of view? Because I can't expect them to pay their bill if there's all these other things going on. And that's the last thing that I want them to be able to have to worry about. So let's see if we can meet their needs first, and then we can have a conversation about billing. That's later, right? And I think essentially going back to your earlier point, the philosophy that we have, improving the quality of life, energy is core of that. Without energy, without electricity, think about all the things that you're not going to be able to do. And during the pandemic, that was exacerbated, right? Everyone was at home. If you didn't have energy, you weren't able to work. You weren't able to school your kids, right? Mm-hmm. Because everybody was remote. You weren't able to operate a computer, a Wi-Fi, or anything like that. So it really became important for us to understand what are the core needs of our customers that go beyond just the what we see and deal with every day from our standpoint, but what do they need? And I think that is going to be the important piece that's going to carry us into this next level of conversation that we're having around climate change and so on.
When you talk about what do they need, John, Department of Sound, you are about music. And music, I've even heard it described as music as a utility almost.
Yeah, absolutely.
I want to understand, essentially, how did music come to play such an essential and important role in not only for you as an individual, but also for the programs that you've established in this community to try and use music as a medium to improve people's lives. Take us back to how music has played a role in your life.
Yeah, I mean, for me, music has always been a constant. My dad played piano since I was a young kid. They were always playing music in the house. And, I started playing piano, playing saxophone in my high school years, and then moved on to DJing when I was about 17 years old. Did a lot of Sweet 16, quinceañeras, grad parties. And then fast forward, I moved to New York, studied at NYU's music technology program, which was a lot of fun and great experience. And then started DJing professionally out there. And for me, music was always kind of present. And then later on in life, when I was about 25, I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder. And, for those people who aren't familiar with bipolar disorder, it's essentially a condition where your moods kind of cycle a little bit higher and lower than maybe the average person, or maybe a lot higher and lower. And I think in that moment, when I started dealing with more of those symptoms in my mid-20s, I recognized the power of music as a healing force. And, not only to maybe calm you down when you're in states that you're very anxious, but also to uplift you when maybe you're depressed, or also remind you of good times from the past and remind you that moods pass. It's gonna pass on to something else going forward. So for me, I was very fortunate to grow up around music, to have an awesome band program in my high school, to discover DJing at a young age and be immersed in it. And when I really started to recognize the power that it has, I teamed up with my buddy Tyler Garnett, one of my longtime friends, and we were like, we want to found an organization that gets this tool, and that's why we think of it as utility, not a luxury. Sound as a tool, music as a tool. We wanted to get this out to as many people as we could.
And in getting it out to as many people as you can, what is it that you're hoping that the people that the Department of Sound interacts with are going to take away from their exposure to your way of experiencing music, creating music, and being a part of music as a force in their lives?
Absolutely. I think the primary thing is just as a way to aid in their mental health. We're dealing with a mental health epidemic among young people, and that's no mystery. And I think a lot of that has come from social media. I think COVID salted that wound, and then you just look at what's going on in the world.
How stay there for a sec, because both you and Brandy have talked about, or now have mentioned COVID.
Yeah.
Tell us what was unique about the COVID experience that you have sensed that kind of salted the wound.
So we were founded in 2018, so kind of right before all that wave of everything. And so we had the unique opportunity and experience of basically switching online with school districts, including Sac City Unified. So we had, in-school programs planned that some of them launched, some of them didn't launch because that was March. So a lot of stuff we were already in school the first semester, had started the second semester, and then it switched online. And so we got to be directly in touch with a lot of middle schoolers and high schoolers. And, these are years that kids are first gaining their independence. I think that they really got the short end of the stick of everything because this is the time that they're learning to, go off on their own and socialize. And these kids are just home for a long period of time. And we witnessed essentially their mental health deteriorate firsthand. And so we changed our programs a bit. We started implementing more podcasting programs that were essentially therapy, in terms of we would have kids make a podcast where you interview your parents, interview your siblings, talking about how COVID makes you feel, what you miss most about hanging out with your friends, produce a musical intro and an outro for that. So we saw how much it affected kids, and that doesn't just go away when things, turn back on. Come 2021, 2022, all those students are still dealing with what happened, no matter what age you are. And I think it affected us all, absolutely. But when you're an adolescent in your formative years like that, that's tough.
That's important. Brandy, I actually want to go back to your experience during COVID. So SMUD serves, in an average year, just off the top of your head, how many calls come through your call center?
Oh, on average, in a year, we might handle close to 2 million contacts.
2 million contacts. Yeah. Okay, so take us back to the beginning of COVID. And, you've got customers who normally would be interacting with you. Now you've got the overlay of COVID. But then you have your own workers, your own employees who are suffering through this, exactly as John says, with their own personal experiences. Take us back there and tell us, what that was like and what you were dealing with at the time.
Yeah. So, that is an interesting time. And I just remember, March 2020, and And while we were all kind of watching the news closely, we were all trying to figure out what was happening, right? So as a leader in an organization, and you've got folks who interact with customers every day, they're looking to you for some level of certainty, like what's happening, what's going to happen. And fortunately, we didn't have all the answers. We just had a plan. So the first thing we knew we were going to do was deploy 100% of our employees off-site, right? Especially in the customer service area, we're like, everybody just go. We're going to close the lobby, the whole nine.
And how many was that?
That was about a little less than 400, so about 300 folks.
Oh my gosh!
Yes. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
All right, keep going.
Yeah.
Keep going.
So and these are folks who are used to the family that we've created, right? They've worked alongside each other, and just being faced with the perspective of, oh, we have to go home. And we don't know for how long, right? First, we started off a week, right? That was the thing. It was just going to be a week.
Weren't we all naive?
It was a week,
then,
2 weeks, it's fine, right? So everybody, we started slowly deploying folks out, and in terms of our customers, we were still handling customer calls just per normal, but we did stop disconnecting for non-payment. We established a moratorium. We're like, that's the last thing we need to be worried about. Everybody needs their lights on for as long as possible, right? So we don't know how this is going to go. And I remember one day, the last day before I left, I was closing down the office and cutting off all the lights. I'm usually one of the last folks to leave. And there was an employee right outside my office who sit not too far from me. And I was walking out, and she was just kind of sitting with her head down. And I said, hey, what's going on? It's time to go. It's late. And she's like, I'm scared. She said, Brandy, I'm scared. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know what this is. I feel like I'm not going to see you again. She was just scared. And I, obviously, we kind of had our moment of sharing just how afraid we were and how certain everything was. But I was confident that, at the end, we were going to figure this out. We were going to be okay. So I just told her to pray on it, go home, be with your family, and call me and let me know if you need anything. I'm on Teams. You got my phone number, my cell. Just let me know. So sent her home, and I remember cutting off the light in my office, and I looked around, and I spent like a good 3 minutes just looking around going, I wonder if I'll ever be back. And it was just I've never been that emotional at work ever. And I kind of lost it. And I was glad I was kind of by myself, you know what I mean? I was like having the moment in my office. So I go home and whatnot. And so I think at that moment, we shifted away from being, worrying about metrics and numbers and making sure that we, did all the things right. And we just focused on being there for one another and being there for our customers, right? We knew that, our customers were going to be struggling through this. And I said, I don't care if you spend 30 minutes on the phone with them, talk them through. Figure out what it is they need. And that's how we started trying to understand, okay, this is going deeper. This is how do we help when it's not about billing and it's not about payment and it's not about lights. What else can we do? How else can we connect them with things that they're going to need? And so that really was the impetus of a lot of work that we've done in the last year. But that's really what it was about, was holding each other up and together. Talking to our team every single day, stand-ups. I mean, we just stay on Teams just all day, just checking in with each other. Kept it very casual, no pressure, because we wanted to make sure that everyone was taken care of so that we can take care of our customers and community. That was the most important thing, is the togetherness. And to your point, the isolation that many of my team members felt and are still kind of dealing with today. I mean, COVID didn't just end. We are still seeing the remnants of the isolation, of the separation.
It's so interesting you bring that up, because, the thing that just popped in my mind in your last few comments was I wanted to ask you, and ask you both, is it over? And you're saying no.
No, it's not. No, it's not. I mean, COVID touched everyone. Whether you knew someone or experienced it yourself or whatever, we all experienced together. We all experienced this trauma together. And I think calling it what it is and acknowledging it is our only way to see ourselves through it. And so even as we're welcoming more employees back to our offices, I am very aware of the trauma that everyone has experienced, including myself and including in my own family. And so creating space and time and opportunity to have these conversations, to support one another through this, is the most important thing that we need to do right now and that we are doing right now.
John, what's your answer to that? If it's not over, what is it that you still perceive and see that with the young people you're interacting with, and just as you go about your daily life, as somebody who's got a heightened sensitivity on mental health and some of the issues, both pro and con, that it brings?
I think the main thing that comes to mind is just the isolation. You know, you've got students who were forced to isolate back in, 2020. And depending on where you were in the country or the world, you were forced to isolate for longer, shorter. But then a lot of people got used to that. And a lot of people also from their jobs are isolating. And a lot of people are like, this is a great thing. And there's benefits, but there's also drawbacks to it. So I think across the board, that isolation, and I think also people got on social media a lot more during COVID, which I think was great for some things, funny videos and things like that, like keep us connected to a degree. But when, students, I don't know the exact stats, but like a lot of adolescents spending 8 to 9 hours a day on average on social media, and like think about how long these kids are maybe even awake. For us, we look at that metric, and that's one thing we're trying to cut into. How do we get kids more connected to themselves and others, and not just ingesting information and advertising and just, not doing anything creative? And so, one of the programs that we've done during COVID was we linked kids up remotely so they can produce a beat together, produce a podcast together, but completely remotely. And the software we have, which is in partnership with Spotify, it's called Soundtrap, it allows that to be done. So yeah, it's really just battling the isolation.
I want to, isolation, big issue. Mm-hmm. I also want to go and ask you about, there's a lot of chatter and discussion going on right now about kids returning back to educational environments, and how kids in general, post-COVID, are behind.
Yeah.
Okay. It's like we took away a couple of formative years of their lives.
Yeah.
But for those who come from traditionally disadvantaged communities, or from communities suffering from socioeconomic deprivation, what have you seen in terms of the particular struggles that they have, and how programs like yours can start to kind of do a bit of healing?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, I think even before COVID, the last decade, we've seen arts cut further and further and further, and it's always the first thing on the chopping block. And I think as a society, we can agree on the value of culture and the value of arts in general, and yet it's the first thing to go when the school district needs to cut something. And, no shade to math and reading and things like that. Those are obviously very important things, but the healing power of a student learning how to make their own beat, learning how to create a podcast with a buddy of theirs, the creative confidence that gives them, the just socializing nature that gives them. You can't expect these kids to just jump back in and have, attention spans that are ready to, ingest a bunch of math, reading, and these other subjects if their anxiety levels are off the charts. They're depressed. They're just kind of have this doom mentality. And on top of what's going on in the world with multiple wars and with climate change, we feel that programs like ours are absolutely necessary, because you need to help these kids out from an internal point first. We can get them caught up in terms of, all the subjects and get the test scores back up to where they need to, but you're not going to do that until these kids are feeling better. And so that's really our mission.
Mm-hmm. These kids represent the workforce of the future.
Absolutely.
And Brandy, the word opportunity in this era many times is connected in conversations with the word equity. For an organization like SMUD, especially given your role and the portfolio that you oversee, how is it that SMUD essentially opens the doors for these young people who are going to be our workforce in the future in a way that not only provides opportunity, but also addresses some of the long-standing equity issues that your Sustainable Communities program addresses in a whole multiplicity of ways?
Yeah, so I think certainly, it's not an easy task, but I think it starts with, and I'll just go there. Representation matters. It really, really matters. And I think over the last years,
tell us what that means to you.
That means to me is if I'm someone who is looking, I'm an adolescent, right? I'm a teenager. I'm struggling to kind of find out who I am and what I want to do. It's really important for us to see ourselves in people that in companies, right? That service us, right? I think it's really been a huge benefit for us to have one of the most diverse leadership teams in the region, and most importantly, I represent an organization that is extremely diverse, and so it's even more important for my folks to get out in the community, at the outreach events, at the workforce events, at the job fairs, to let them know that hey, there are people at SMUD that look like all of us. We represent the community, and I strive to make that a very important point in our process. It is one thing to have diverse representation internally, just for the sake of making sure that we're reflective, but it's also important for us to bring diversity of thought, diversity of experience, diversity of background. That makes a much rounder workplace. It makes us able to be more responsive to customers' needs when they come in, right? Because there's some background, there's some depth, there's some history there. And so it's something that we've taken very, very seriously, and it is embedded in everything that we do. So there is not a thing, a program, an opportunity, an outreach effort that does not have equity top of mind.
Really?
Absolutely. So,
well, that's interesting because many times in corporations, so my world typically are corporate boardrooms, and boardrooms and senior management teams will endorse all kinds of programs related to equity and opportunity. And so the bottom of the organization will look like a United Nations or more locally, more like California, right? But the top of the organization in the boardroom, more times than not, will look like, pardon the expression, 1950s America. And the question is that how do you effectively infuse that commitment, not just from a talking words and slogan perspective of equity, opportunity, justice, all that sort of thing in words, but in deed. So tell us a little bit more about how SMUD does that, and what are the miles yet to go?
Oh, so I'm not going to say that the problem is solved, right? we definitely have work to do, but we launched a D&IB strategy maybe about 2 years ago. We've hired a director of diversity, equity, and inclusion, Dr. Markeisha Webster, who is outstanding, who has done a lot of work in just education, right? Building the awareness, building an understanding around how bias plays into everything that we do, right? It's the brain's shortcut, right? And so figuring out how that we identify it, we address it, and we move forward through it. Because I think building awareness around it is the way that you change it, is the way that you check it, right? So when you think about a hiring process, and when you think about, when we go out and do outreach efforts and recruitment efforts, making sure that that recruitment effort is inclusive of everyone. And I don't just mean, certain demographics, but making sure that our outreach is very intentional, right? So if we know that we're missing a certain background or a certain level of experience, being very intentional and knowing where to go get that, right? And who to partner with to build that awareness so that folks know we're hiring for this, and we need folks with these types of backgrounds and education backgrounds or whatever that is, and putting our network and community to use in getting those ripe applicants into our pipeline. But again, it is sometimes hit or miss. There are areas that are still lacking in our organization, and we are doubling our efforts on the outreach to build the pipeline, because the wider pipeline means you have more folks flooding that, right? That's what you want to do. You want a rich field of candidates, right, that represent the communities that we serve and coming in. And that starts with awareness and intentionality.
John, how is it that in terms of your own work and that of the Department of Sound, how is it that you all ensure that you are, with an intentionality, reaching all of the communities that really are in need of the type of programming that you bring? Because it's so easy to get siloed, to go to Brandy's point, it's so easy to get siloed, and not because of malice or anything like that. It's just we all get kind of immersed and deep in what we're doing. But for you and the importance of your work, focusing on the immediate need that you're solving, how do you make sure that you stay broad and connected?
I think the primary thing is just knowing your clientele, knowing your customer, if we'll call them that, our students. We're primarily in underserved communities. Our pledge is to never charge a student or their family for our program. All of this is subsidized by people like SMUD and other donors and things like that. So, we're in Sac City Unified. We're in a lot of different school districts. So it's mainly for us to just know where these kids are, know what community centers they're at. We started at Mac Road Valley High Community Center in 2018 and followed up with the second slew of programs at La Familia Counseling Center in South Sacramento. So it's partnering with those types of people who are already in the community and can essentially recruit students for this type of thing. So it really just starts with knowing who you're serving.
Well, on the partnering piece, you and the Department of Sound have a partnership with SMUD. Okay?
Thank you.
It's not necessarily intuitive, at least to a guy like me, as to the reason that your program, dealing with music, would be connected to our local energy provider. Tell us a little bit about how the partnership got started and what you're looking to achieve.
Sure. Well, it started, I believe, with Betty Lowe, who I knew from the Kings. Shout out to Betty Lowe. And she approached us to apply for a SMUD or a Shine grant. So we did that. We did not get the first one, but we dusted ourselves off. We came back next year, and I believe 2019 we got our first Shine grant, and since then we've been partnering with SMUD in multiple different ways. So the first thing is we're a young nonprofit. As anyone who's had a startup or a nonprofit specifically, people don't always want to call you back. People,
you don't say.
So having a big fish on your team, on your partner page of your website, makes people kind of be like, oh, well, maybe SMUD already did their due diligence on them, so let's give them a chance, So once we first linked up with SMUD, I saw doors open automatically in terms of not only people we were reaching out to, but also people that SMUD was directly connecting us to. So that's the first major benefit we've seen in this partnership. But the second thing, and something I'm more interested in exploring over the next few years, is with music being the most popular thing amongst kids and across the board, that's something that kids will agree on. Genres might be different, but music, it's that. We see ourselves as champions of the youth, and really, with the position that we have, as we essentially have this direct line to thousands of students within the community. So when you talk about issues like climate change, which that's going to affect youth more than anyone else, and obviously SMUD is a leader in talking about all this and really pushing a lot of cutting edge technology, we want to ensure that these kids, especially in the underserved communities, are connected to that conversation, their voices are amplified, that people are actually hearing what they have to say. So, we value the partnership, and we're definitely looking forward to what comes next.
Where does the connectivity come for you, Brandy, when you look at partnerships like SMUD has with Department of Sound and John, to the Sustainable Communities Initiative, as well as the work that you lead every single day as being the customer-facing part of the SMUD enterprise?
Well, I think ultimately, and you hit the point just dead on, music is a way to reach the youth. Mm-hmm. And if I have a message that I need to get to the youth, what better way to get to leverage that, right? And so it's things like that, opening doors that SMUD isn't able to open. That is the essence of our community partnerships in a lot of spaces. And that's why we started Sustainable Communities, was to convene all of the nonprofits, community leaders, community partnerships, organizations and whatnot together to figure out how we can work together to solve a collective issue. Or many collective issues. And so I think certainly for me, the dots are very much connected. Mm-hmm. As with Department of Sound, if we have a message that needs to get out, like climate change is not, it's not sexy, but it's a requirement. It's a necessity. We have to think our way through this, and it will be the next several generations that will have to tackle this and will be dealing with this from moving forward. So they're the ones that we have to position to be ready to deal and address these challenges. And so I look to partners like Department of Sound to help us reach them in whatever ways are needed. Because our message, again, resonates with some, not with others. But we know that there's a demographic that we need to reach, and that is the youth, and that is the way to move forward.
Yeah. And I would assume that because of your work and working and leading the customer-facing part of SMUD, that, the people that interact with your team, they're almost like the canary in the cave, because in addition to billing issues and access issues and all that sort of thing, these are the folks who are directly dealing with the consequences of how climate is changing. That's right. And how their situations actually make, cost of energy, just the heating and cooling of their homes and businesses and things like that, even more dire for them because of the fact that they may not necessarily have the tools.
That's right.
What do what is it that you and your team have learned that informs kind of the not just the climate change conversation, but the aspirations of the zero carbon 2030 plan?
That's a great question. I think that we've learned a lot in the last probably 3 or so years since we launched the Zero Carbon Initiative. And we started really from listening, right? So we knew we had a thing that we wanted to do. We knew we had a thing that we had to do, right, for the region. But we didn't really understand how that might resonate with everyone, right? So we held a series of listening sessions. We had, tens, right, of times done it. And the information that we were learning was that our message resonated differently depending on who you were and how you were coming into it. Like, we know right off the bat, there are folks that are going to be able to participate in this conversation because they get it. They understand the technology, they understand the science behind it, and they're like, yep, I'm in. What do I need to do? I've got the deep pockets in order to do that. But there's more folks that are, I know it's a concern, but I have this over here to deal with right now, and I can't really deal with this right now, right? So if you think about it in terms of that, the customers are our voice. We're here for them. And if we're doing something that is not resonating with them, or they feel as though it's not for them, then there's an opportunity there. And so I think certainly we've learned a lot. It's adjusted and informed a lot of the programs and services that we've offered. The way that we market certain things, it's definitely informed what our goals around what we think we're going to be able to achieve with customer participation versus what we're going to need to do just utility alone. Mm-hmm. We understand which things, which offerings, if you will, like, an EV. I love EVs. Can everyone afford EVs? Not really.
Not yet.
Not yet. For those who can, what are some of the challenges? And getting that information helps us form a better product. And then we can also look for opportunities where, like I said, not everybody can. So who can we partner with to help advocate for lowering the cost of EVs, or implementing programs with used EVs, or car sharing, those types of things, other types of mobility programs. How can we fit the need based on, what our customers want and what other things that they're going to need in the future? And so we take the voice of the customer very seriously. And to your point, being a customer-facing organization, we collect all that information and we dissect it constantly, because we're always trying to stay ahead as much as possible of what our customers are telling us and what we need. We don't want to provide something that they're like, this is great, but I have no need for that.
Have you,
right?
As you all have embarked on this mission, have you ever, because of all that data that you're receiving, have you and the rest of leadership ever had any aha moments where you've discovered something through the customer data and those interactions that, frankly, all of the big smart people didn't come up with on their own?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yes.
Can you give us one? I'm just curious.
Yeah, we actually had a big aha moment. This has been a couple of years in the making in terms of what we thought we knew about customer homes, right? And when we look at in terms of, and I'm going to kind of fly through this pretty quickly, the older homes, we just assume like, oh, they've got, inefficient heating, inefficient cooling. Oh, they're going to be interested in doing this right now and adopting new measures. Well, what we found when we actually put boots on the ground was that wasn't the case, right? We were actually collecting real data, knocking on doors and saying, hey, customer, we're noticing that, you're in a home that was built in the 60s. How are you feeling about, adopting these new measures? And they're like, yeah, no, thank you. I'll wait till it fails, right? So instead of thinking that folks were going to be very proactive in wanting to adopt measures, it turns out that most people aren't interested in doing any of that until it actually breaks, right? Mm-hmm. So how can we get them at the time that it breaks versus just based on age of home? Just kind of one of those things that like smart people decided this, but the customer actually said this, yeah. Right? And then we actually ended up developing an algorithm to look for inefficient heating and cooling so we can kind of tell when the moment of failure was about to happen. And then we reached out to the customers. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it's just about timing. It's what you think you know based on what they actually tell you, right? And so I've really advocated for, thank you. We think we know, but let's absolutely validate first before we go out doing something that's completely missing the mark.
I want to bring that approach to you, John. So some of the people with us probably don't know how deep your love of music goes. And you touched on the fact that you've been a DJ. You touched on the fact that you were at NYU in New York and all that. But you're kind of a bi-coastal guy. Mm-hmm. And in the music scene in a number of different places. most locally here, in addition to your work with Department of Sound, and among your other activities, you actually are DJ for the Kings. Correct?
Yeah.
I want you to give us a little bit of insight about what people don't know that they don't know about the music scene here, because I want to go somewhere with it in comparing it to your other travels.
Yeah, I think that people in Sacramento are very into music. You know, they value music, you know, immensely, but it's a place that it doesn't necessarily kind of get the shine that it probably deserves, I believe. And, you know, even just being at Golden One Center, DJing that environment, like, you know, and we're picking out the dance cam songs and the kiss cam songs, you know, you might put Genuine on, or like, you know, different stuff like that. You see just how much this stuff affects people in a large scale. But I think one of the frustrating things that a lot of artists have found in this city is that they feel that they need to leave town to build their career. They feel like they need to go to a New York, an LA, elsewhere to properly get the opportunities to further their career.
So I got to ask, isn't that what you did?
I did do that. And one of the reasons that Tyler and I started this organization in 2018, I left in 2007. What's changed during that time is that the internet has really become the main place for music discovery.
Really?
The internet existed in 2007, but it was a little bit different in terms of you really had to be in a music city. You had to be in, like I said, New York, LA, Nashville, Atlanta, London to kind of just be kind of out there working with, you know, fellow musicians and executives and things. And I think now, like, we have Victoria Monet, who went to Sheldon High School. She's up for seven Grammy nominations. She left town, and I can't speak for her necessarily, but, you know, people often enjoy living in Sacramento, but they realize they need a creative economy to actually work in. And so we're hoping that the work that we do, including in partnership with the studio, Shattered Records. Shout out to Jack O'Donnell behind the glass over there.
Shout out, Jack.
Yeah, he's the owner here and been an amazing partner. We're hoping that not only through this tool as a studio, but through our programs across the board, that we can help to be a catalyst to building the scene here, because we see Sacramento as having a potential to be this kind of creative oasis. It's a beautiful place to live. It's a beautiful place to create. And if we can build the creative economy out so that we keep more talent here, you know, instead of just shipping it out, because really that's what we've done.
Well, not to be overly critical, but I have to tell you, as a former concert promoter and nightclub owner, I've had like 50 different careers in my time. Sacramento historically has reminded me of a live version of that old movie from the 80s, Footloose, where they killed everything. Government killed everything related to music, dancing, all that sort of stuff. So when you talk about a creative economy here in Sacramento, and creative economies, the creative economy includes all forms of art. What grade would you give the hospitality of this local environment for supporting the creative economy, including the work that you and your colleagues do right now?
I think it's probably D-ish, you know?
D-ish.
It might be F in some respects, but I'll say it's D because of the fact that we're having the conversations now. That's what's changing. You know, in the mayor's recent State of the City, there was a whole section about that on music. There, in the last 5 years, it seems to be something that has really been prioritized, and they recognize that just because you have great jobs here, well-paying jobs or whatever, people don't necessarily want to live somewhere just because there's jobs. They want something to do. They want culture in the city. And so we're hoping that, you know, again, we can help be a part of figuring out what policy changes need to happen. There's basic things like permitting processes that permits for single day events in certain respects are significantly higher than cities like Oakland. So I think it's great to see the conversation happening now, though. I will say that. But we do have a lot of work to do.
Arts and culture, very important. Community service, very important. Yes. Brandy, one of the organizations that I know you've been involved with for a long time is the local chapter of the Lynx. And tell us, when you think about after you have had a very, very active week in, leading your organization, providing all of the services that you guys do, what is it that you enjoy within this region that you like to get out and do? And whether it's just relaxation or public service, give us an insight as to what is it that you love most about being here?
So I to tap back on that, I think we're doing a little bit better with the music scene. I've seen a couple of good shows recently. We've had a couple of good festivals in town, and I'm going. It's a thing. I used to enjoy going to Harlow's in the day, and seeing a bunch of live shows. I mean, great acoustics. I mean, it's a great place. But honestly, I'm really digging the scene that is happening downtown. I love the area around Doco. There's a lot of things to do. I'd like to see that replicated. I'm a foodie. I like to eat whatever, So going to restaurants, engaging just in the outdoors, that's really what feeds my soul on the weekends.
What's the most recent, fabulous meal you've had here in Sacramento?
Oh, do I have to put them on? Okay, let's do it. On. Oh, gosh. Okay, so I love the 7th Street Standard.
All right. Okay.
I love them. Chef Pedro, shout out to Chef Pedro. Oh, my gosh. They make an amazing whatever down there. I mean, it's just breakfast, lunch, dinner, the whole nine. They're amazing.
Mm-hmm. And the last good show you've seen? Since you brought
okay, so I did cheat a little bit. I did go see Tony, but that was not here. We couldn't get them here.
Bay Area?
Bay Area.
Okay. That just validates John's point. That we got some work to do.
No, we do have a little bit. I would have liked to see Tony here.
Next year.
Mm-hmm.
Next year. Yeah. Okay, there we go.
Yeah.
And John, for you, give me a sense of if you were bringing one of your very sophisticated friends from New York, okay, into town, and they're like, "Oh my God, we're in Sacramento.
Yeah.
Where are we going to eat, and what are we going to do?" Okay, where is it that you're going to take them to prove their assumptions wrong?
Okay. Well, first I'm going to bring them here to the studio. Have a session here, do something like that.
Okay.
There's a place called Mother. In Midtown. I've been there a couple times this week. It's pretty new. That's been an amazing little place to have lunch or dinner.
Is that a vegan restaurant?
Partially vegan.
Partially vegan?
Yeah. So, but they got a bunch of vegan options. So that's a great spot. And then I'm going to probably take them to the river, American River Parkway. I spent a lot of time as I ran track in high school and cross country. So spent a ton of time down there in the parkway, just running in the before school, after school. So there's a spot at Sutter's Landing. Sunset is beautiful there. So I'm going to take them there.
Okay. And and if there was a place, a venue, all right, to go see a show, get some live music in, where are we going to go?
I'm going to say Harlow's.
Okay.
I think that Harlow's has been amazing because it's just, they've kind of been a constant here. They just held it down for a long time. And I think they've also shown what a solid venue in town can do. So I'm going to say Harlow's.
Community jewel.
Exactly.
Community jewel.
Exactly. Amazing location. And they've just been around.
Well, you guys have really been full service. We have talked about virtually everything from COVID to opportunity to even where to go hang out on the weekends. You all have done your public service for the week. And I think we'll leave it there. Thank you both for participating. And as we wrap up today's episode, let's remember that together we can shape a brighter, more sustainable future for Sacramento and beyond. The journey to a zero-carbon world is not just a vision, it's a commitment that each of us can contribute to in our own unique way. I want to thank our guests, SMUD's Chief Customer Officer, Brandy Bolden, and the Department of Sound's John Hamilton, who he and his amazing staff have done exceptional work in producing this podcast series. Don't forget that these conversations are important not just for you to listen to, but start your own conversation as well. Until that time, I'm Scott Syfax. See you next time.